buddies. How are you all doing? I hope everybody is learning, playing and eating well like always. Now it's been a long time that we have met, but I hope that you didn't forget me, right? Because I have got this very interesting thing for you. So first of all, let me welcome you all to your most amazing platform of PW Girls, and this is your biology buddy Nikita and the much awaited, very important and free. I have got this chapter which is going to give you free marks in your boards. And that chapter is our environment. I hope everybody is ready because this chapter is going to give you 4 to 5 marks at least. A very short chapter with such high weightage. Now you have other chapters like life process. Very big chapter, but only 7 to 8 marks. A short chapter with 4 to 5 marks. We better learn it quickly. But is there something to learn? Everything that you know, just a tad bit of an upgradation and you all are good to go. So let's start revising our chapter, our environment. We are going to finish it very quickly. So that's why I want you guys to be ready, buckle up, take your pen and papers and let's get on with it. Alright, so here, what all things do we have to study? So let's see that first, the chapter, our environment. So we'll see what is this environment actually is. And then we'll learn about ecosystem, nutrient cycling, ozone, garbage. Now, out of everything that we are going to learn, it's just introduction that you're already aware about. Only few topics that are very essential that's gonna give you that free marks. And those topics would be 10% law and it would be biological magnification and a little bit about food chain, food web, here and there. Okay, so what are we waiting for? Let's begin. First of all, it's very important for us to understand that we are talking about the chapter our environment. What actually is environment? So suppose in an environment, suppose I am an organism. Okay, now everything around me, everything surrounded to me is actually our environment. Now it could be any living component, like it could be bacteria, fungi, birds, animals, your parents, your relatives, your friends, or it could be any non-living component like air, water and many other things, the sunlight, the stone, the river body. Okay, so all these things in a surrounding where I am the system, at my surrounding, everything is known as environment. Okay, now that particular geographical area where we will see the interdependence of these living things with these non-living things. That particular geographical area is known as ecosystem, right? For example, even if you take a bit of or a glass of your tap water, that in itself is an ecosystem. Because you know that tap water consists of a lot of impurities that also consist of microorganisms. So even that is an ecosystem. Suppose you're walking and you saw a fresh pond. The pond is also an ecosystem. Now, when you go to your jungle safaris, what exactly is jungle? You will see a lot of animals, lot of plants, and they are fed up with, they are having very many rocks and water bodies. So that in itself is a forest ecosystem. We also have grassland ecosystem. We also have desert ecosystem. Not only that, our gut is in itself is an ecosystem. Okay, so what exactly is the ecosystem? A geographical area where the abiotic and biotic are interdependent with each other. Okay, now let's talk about us humans. So we need a lot of non-living things, right? Abiotic components such as we need air to live. Okay, we need water to drink. We need water for the basic metabolic activities going around in our body. In fact, majority of our body is made up of water, right? But then how come these abiotic components need the living components? So have you ever thought that who is exactly releasing that air outside in the environment? Of course, plants are releasing oxygen, and us humans and animals are releasing carbon dioxide. So, you got it right, that biotic and abiotic are interdependent on each other. Now, of course, you can say that biotic needs more abiotic component. Okay, so that in itself, the interdependence of biotic and abiotic is known as ecosystem. Okay, now there are different types of ecosystem. For example, I've told you the cup of the water, tap water, our gut, the forest, the river bodies, all of them are ecosystem. But we can see the interdependence of biotic and abiotic factors with a little bit of human effort as well. So on that basis, we have categorized the ecosystem into the natural ecosystem and the artificial ecosystem. Now, the natural ecosystem can further be categorized like the land ecosystem, that is known as terrestrial ecosystem, which consists of grasslands, forests, desert. Then we talk about the aquatic ecosystem, which is like that consists of water, the river bodies. For example, now rivers, lakes, oceans, right, ponds, they are aquatic ecosystem. Now we are very well aware that we have some freshwater bodies, we have some marine, like not so freshwater bodies, the salty water bodies. So on that basis also we can categorize aquatic ecosystem as fresh and marine water. Marine water, that means salty water like seas and oceans. Okay, freshwater, rivers, ponds, they are freshwater. So what are those? Those are actually ecosystems. Okay, now we have talked about that these all are present in nature without any human effort. But haven't you gone to a zoo where you can see a lot of animals? They are also dependent on the plants for their food, for their natural activities. Right? So what are these? With some human effort, we can also see the interdependence between biotic and abiotic components, and that would come under artificial ecosystem. That means that includes the human efforts, human interference, like agricultural field. We are sowing the seeds, right? So yes, that also requires human effort. Aquarium. You remember, aquarium means that you have water and in that you deliberately or with human effort, you have put down some fishes. You have collected those fishes and put down in that water body. Okay? Of course, it is artificial. Now, poultry farms also and zoo, all of them artificial ecosystem. And in these geographical areas with some human effort and not such human effort, we can see the ecosystems. But I have said a lot of times that abiotic are interdependent with biotic. So we are all very well aware about what are abiotic and biotic, right? Let's come to that also, that the ecosystem has its types. We have seen the interdependence between biotic. Biotic means the living component. That could be fungi, insects, birds, humans, animals, bacteria. So they are living components and they are interdependent with the abiotic components. Abiotic means non-living, like sun rays, wind, air, clouds, right? Elements, minerals, all of them are abiotic components. The rock, the soil, they all are abiotic component. That means the non-living component. Okay. Now, let's see that we have categorized the ecosystem into biotic and abiotic. So we have talked about the abiotic components like air, water, wind, soil, temperature, rainfall. They are non-living components. Now let's talk about the biotic components. We have generally talked about their examples, but do you know that we can categorize them as well? So basically in nature, there are three types of biotic components present. Okay, those are producers, consumers and decomposers. Now, as the word sounds, producers, they are producing. We are talking in context with the food, with the energy. Okay, so here let's see that these producers, they make or they produce their own food. So they are producers. Now I know that's very clear that these producers will be autotrophs because they can make their own food. Now that could be photosynthetic or chemosynthetic, that we have already covered. Now let's come to the consumers. What will the consumers do? They will consume. Consume what? So these consumers depend on other organisms. Now that could be producers or any other consumer. And on that basis, we can further categorize the consumers as primary, secondary or tertiary consumers. Okay? Then see, in the nature, if there are a lot of producers and there are a lot of consumers, someday, like, nothing is immortal, right? So they're gonna die. Now in the nature, we will have a lot of dead bodies of these plants and of these animals. What will happen to them? Let them keep piling up? Of course not. So we need a way so that we can get rid of these dead bodies. Now what do? So we have another organism, and that is decomposers. What does these decomposers do? Decomposers will secrete some chemicals, some enzymes, so that they will keep on feeding on these dead and decaying matter. How do they do it? So basically decomposers are saprotrophic. Saprotrophic means that they depend on dead and decaying matter. They feed on dead and decaying matter. Okay, so they secrete some chemicals and they break down these dead bodies so that they can pull out the nutrients from it, and these nutrients will go into the soil, which will then be collected by the producers, and furthermore the producers will be consumed by the consumers, and the nutrients will keep on flowing within the organisms. Okay, so we are clear about the biotic components. Now one thing that I've told you, that they keep on feeding on each other. So who eats on what? That is actually, and we've talked about that the decomposers will release these nutrients in the soil. So these nutrients will flow within the organisms, right? Now let's talk about that is considered as nutrient cycling. So what exactly is nutrient cycling? Let's see. That in nature, it's very simple. Who feeds on whom? Who feeds on whom? And the linear sequence of it can be categorized as one of the component of the nutrient cycling. Okay. Now let me give you an example, a simple example. Grass is fed by the deer, and the deer will be fed by the lion. Okay. So now let's consider this. This in itself, you can see that the grass, like, they will get their own food. They will make their own food. They are autotrophic. So they are the producers. Now the deer is an herbivore. Now this herbivore will feed on the grass. So here, those organism that feeds on the producer is known as the primary consumer. Primary consumer, why? Because it feeds on the producer. And we have this lion feeding on the deer, lion feeding on the primary consumer, and that gives it the secondary consumer name. Okay. So what have we seen here? Here the nutrients are transferring because the lion is eating the deer and the deer is eating the grass. So nutrients are flowing within these organisms, and this linear sequence of organisms which determines or represents the flow of these nutrients in a linear sequence, and that is known as the food chain. Okay, now you can come back here. Not only two, but there can be several organisms, right? So let's talk about it here. Let's suppose the producer is the grass, which is fed by the rat. So rat is the primary consumer. Rat is been fed by the snake. So snake is the secondary consumer. And the snake is been fed by the owl or the eagle, as per your choice. So that would be considered as tertiary consumer. Now, there would be quaternary consumer as well. That will known as the apex. Now, keep this thing in mind that the questionnaire will be there, and the question will be that why there are only 3 to 4 trophic levels. you will only see 3 to 4 organisms here and not furthermore. Keep this question in mind because at the end we'll get all these answers. And then we are the decomposers who will get these nutrients from the dead and decayed body and then further transmit it to the soil, and from the soil we can get it into the producers. But then how come producers get their energy? Producers get their food. So of course they make their food by utilizing the sunlight, or they can also utilize the chemicals as per photosynthetic and chemosynthetic. Okay, so that's how these nutrient travels. But will the organism say that I will only feed on this particular thing? Like the rat. The rat will say that I will only feed on grass, nothing else. The snake will say I will only feed on this particular rat. I don't want anything else. Like sometimes we also are very stubborn that I only want to eat pizza, I only want to eat burger, something like that. No. So, but we have a lot of options, right? So, similarly in the nature, the organisms also have a lot of options. So, there is not one single linear sequence of these organisms exist, but there is a network. And the network of these linear sequences of food chains, they all are interconnected. All the organisms have a lot of options, right? For example, here let's see that this grass is a producer. This grass can be fed by the deer, it can be fed by the cow, it can be fed by several herbivores. Okay, it can be fed by the rat also. Now let's see that there is a fox. The fox will eat the deer and the lion will eat the fox. But the lion can directly eat the deer as well. It can eat the cow also. It can eat the rat as well. Okay. So here you can say that there are several interconnected food chains. These organisms have a lot of options. The interconnected food chains are known as food web. Interconnection, right? That forms a network-like structure. And that network of these food chain, the interconnected food chains, is known as food web. Okay, that consists of a lot of organisms. Now let's focus on this one single food chain. Okay, now in a linear sequence of a food chain, there are a lot of organisms that we have seen that will undergo the nutrient cycling. So when we are talking about this nutrient cycling, each of the organism occupies its own position. Like I am here, I'll only be feeding when we are talking about just one single linear sequence of food chain. So I'll be eating only on this particular organism. So I have occupied this position. Similarly, here also you can say that we have producers occupying the first position always. Therefore, we term it, these positions are known as trophic level. So the producers will always be at the trophic level 1. Here you will see producers are at T1 or trophic level 1. Then we have the primary consumers that will be on T2. We have secondary consumer on T3, tertiary consumer on T4, and apex predator. Apex predator is the quaternary consumer, you can say, but nobody feeds on the apex predator. They'll die, and of course the decomposers will feed on their body. But of course, remember the question that only 3 to 4 trophic level exist. But why? Because there is a very important concept, and that important concept is your 10% law of energy transfer. Very, very, very important. Okay. Now, Lindemann in 1942 gave this law which said when an organism is feeding on something, some other organism, maybe some producer. So what will happen? Out of everything that he is feeding on, or it may be feeding on, only 10% of the energy, 10% of the energy will get transferred to the next trophic level. And rest of the 90% will be lost. Rest of the 90% will be lost in the transfer and like in the form of heat or respiration. One more time. whenever an organism is feeding on one other organism, out of everything that is feeding on or it may be feeding on, only 10% of the energy gets transferred to the next trophic level. Rest 90% will be lost in the form of heat. Okay. Now, how the questions are going to be? Let's see a question here that suppose the grasses, how will the grass have energy? Because of the sunlight. Because of the sunlight, let's see that the grasses have energy that is about 2 lakh joule. Okay, joule is the SI unit of energy. Okay. Now, as I said, only 10% will be transferred to the next level. So, what will you do? 10% here, the grasshopper will receive 10% of grass. 10% of grass's energy. Okay. So, what will you write here? 10%. That means 10 by 100. And how much did the grass energy was? So, it was 200,000 joules, which can also be written as 200 kilojoule. Okay. Now, when you solve this, you will get the answer to be 20,000 joule. Okay. It will be 20,000 joule. From the next level, let's go to the next level. So, here the grasshopper had 20,000 joule. Next, the frog, the secondary consumer, will have only 2,000 joule. And the python, the last consumer, will have 200 joules of energy. So, you can say in a food chain, the maximum energy will always be with the producer, whereas the minimum energy will be with the apex predator or the last one occupying the food chain. Last position, last trophic level of the food chain. So now you might have got an idea that why does only 3 to 4 trophic level exist in nature? Now this is because due to energy loss. Now the organism at the last trophic level might not have enough energy. They do not have the substantial amount of energy to utilize, and thereby the trophic level exists for only 3 to 4 trophic levels and not more than that. It's a very important question. Okay. Now, let me make it very clear for you that how will you solve this? So, let's talk about this 10% law of energy transfer one more time. That when you go from producer to consumer, if you have to find the energy, you just have to divide by 10. But when you are moving from apex predator to a level before, the trophic level before, so what will you do? You will multiply it by 10. So when you are going this way, you have to multiply it by 10. Okay? Because the question is going to be, you will be given the energy level of the tertiary consumer, and you have to find out that how much initial energy was with the producer. So all you need to do is multiply by 10 one time, two times, and thrice. Okay? I hope it's clear. Now, moving forward to the next very important thing, which is biomagnification, or you can also call it biological magnification. Okay? Now, let's talk about what is it. You know, there are a lot of industries and everything that with urbanization, with industrialization, we are exhibiting a lot of pollution. And this pollution is present in the environment, in the water bodies, in the atmosphere, in the food, in the organisms that we are eating. Okay. So what exactly happened? Let's take an example here. Suppose there was an industry. And the industry opened its sewage, or you can say the industry let out its waste products, the oils and chemicals, everything in the water body. Okay. Now, of course, this water body became contaminated. So, every organism, the plants within the water, the organisms, the fishes, right, the small fishes, the large fishes, the zooplanktons, the phytoplanktons. Now, everybody got contaminated, and everyone here had toxins in their body. Okay. So, the phytoplanktons here let's talk about the aquatic ecosystem and we'll talk about their food chain. So the phytoplanktons will be fed by the zooplanktons. The zooplanktons will be fed by the small fishes. Then the large fishes. The large fishes will be eaten by us, right? Because of course we are omnivores, right? So we can feed them. Now what will happen next? Let's see. So the zooplanktons, the phytoplanktons had these toxins. Now, when the small fishes had these phytoplanktons, zooplanktons, what happened? The toxins got transferred to the small fishes. From the small fishes, it got transferred to the large fish. From the large fish, when we eat like very tasty fishes, what happened here? You will see that these toxins are admitted into our body. So what's happening here? This transfer of toxins are harmful substances. The transfer of these harmful substances into the subsequent trophic level, this process is known as biomagnification, or you can also call it biological magnification. Okay, now think about it. Think about it, this thing here, that there was zooplanktons and they fed on phytoplanktons and they were contaminated because of this contaminated water that came out from the industry and many other things. Okay, so here let's see that phytoplankton suppose had 2 ppm of, let's say they have 2 ppm of the toxin materials. So then what will happen? The zooplanktons will have a little bit more because they will feed on a lot of phytoplankton. So suppose they have 4 ppm. ppm means parts per million. Then the small fishes will have even more because they are feeding on a lot of zooplanktons. The large fish feeds on a lot of small fishes. So again, the toxins will increase in the large fish and they will subsequently increase in the humans as well. So now when we were talking about the energy transfer, we were saying that the maximum energy was present at the producer level, at the first trophic level. But when there is maximum energy at that trophic level, there would be minimum toxins. So minimum toxins are present at the producer level, at the first trophic level, whereas maximum toxins will be present at the last trophic level. And this entire process of the transfer of these toxins or any other harmful substances, these biodegradable substances, all of them, this entire phenomena is known as biological magnification or biomagnification. Okay, now we have to talk about 2 accidents that could happen in the universe, or let's talk about the earth. Okay, we're just talking about the earth. Now let's talk about it. So have you guys heard of ozone? Right? Ozone is important for us or not? When we think of it, of course, ozone is very important for us. Why? Let's see that on the earth, we have this blanket that covers the earth, and this blanket protects the earth from the harmful UV radiation, from harmful UV rays, or you can also call them ultraviolet radiations. So from the sun, a lot of rays comes into our earth. Visible rays, UV rays, sun rays, a lot of rays. Okay. But among all of these, the ultraviolet radiations are very harmful for us. They can cause a lot of things. We'll discuss this. Okay. So here let's talk about that. We need to have this blanket. And what does this blanket do? See, our blanket protects us from the cold. So this blanket protects the earth from the harmful UV rays that comes from the sun. But how? And how is this ozone formed? So let's talk about that. Above the atmosphere, very high, there is another layer, and this another layer is known as stratosphere. On the stratosphere, let's see. On the stratosphere, we have a lot of oxygen. But at this level, they receive a lot of sun rays. Along with that, they also receive a lot of UV radiations. Okay, so what does this UV radiation do? Say, they are very powerful, strong, so they break the oxygen into its radicals. That means monatomic elemental oxygen. What are radicals? You don't need to worry about that. Just say that they break the O2. O2 is a gas, right? It is diatomic. That has been broken down into mono elements, into its elemental oxygen. Okay? But these elemental oxygen are very, very unstable. They want to form their own bond. They don't want to remain single. They want to have a relationship. They want to form a bond. So then what do? The oxygen, they come up, and the oxygen, the elemental oxygen we are talking about, they form the bond with the oxygen gas itself. And then they form this ozone layer, which is O3. And this was the blanket that we were talking about. So what does this oxygen do? It betrays. Yes, this oxygen, ozone betrays. UV helped to make this ozone by breaking the diatomic oxygen into its elemental form. But then when the ozone is formed, it does not allow the UV radiations to enter the earth and therefore protects it. So the blanket has been formed over the earth, and that blanket is known as ozone layer. Okay. Now, of course, we are humans. We tend to be very, very greedy and needy sometimes, right? And we over exploit things. So what did we do? Earlier, we had these instruments, we had these machines, and they were releasing very, very harmful substances. Okay. Now let's talk about them. That those harmful substances were chlorofluorocarbons, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, halogens, methyl bromide, methyl chloroform. So what are they doing? Let's see. The chlorine of the chlorofluorocarbons can also be written as CFCs. Okay. So what exactly these chlorines are doing? Let's see. That is chlorine. The chlorine breaks the ozone. The chlorine breaks the ozone into oxygen and radical of oxygen. So because of this, the ozone layer is depleting, and we can see the holes in the ozone layer. Now, whenever there is hole, of course, the UV rays will enter, and they can cause a lot of disorders to us. Okay, so the ozone hole, the depletion of ozone layer has been caused by the harmful gases, which are CFCs, and these CFCs were released by, earlier we used to use these refrigerators and air conditioners, the ACs, they used to release these gases. Now, after the protocols, after a lot of summits, of course, we have upgraded our machines as well, right? So we have minimized, or we can say that we have decreased the release of these CFCs. But there was a large hole that was seen that allowed the UV rays to enter the earth. That caused a lot of disorders, specifically cancer. Okay, so what does this UV rays do? Let's see, why is it so harmful? So UV rays or effects of ozone depletion are also related with what does this UV do for us or do to us, so that it is considered as very harmful. So it causes skin cancer. It also causes cataract. It can damage our DNA, and of course, because of that, our DNA will mutate. Okay, and you know, most of the mutations are harmful. Next, it can cause reduced immunity. We will become much more weaker. It can lead to sunburns, like our skin would have burns, you know, like whenever we are whenever we come in close contact with the fire, so there are burns. Similarly, sun is a huge ball of fire, and the sun rays have a very high temperature. When the sun rays come directly towards the earth and we are exposed to it, it can cause sunburns. Of course, the crop productivity would also be hampered, and they would also lead to the destruction of marine life. These all are the disorders of depletion of ozone layer, or these all the things can be brought about by when UV rays, or you can say direct sunlight, comes on the earth. Okay, now let's move to the next topic, and this is the last one, which is garbage. We are very well aware of the garbage, right? This is the second most important thing here. And let's see that a lot of unwanted things comes out from the useful things that we eat. For example, let's take an example of a toffee. The toffee inside it will have with this caramelized chocolate, and it has to be wrapped, of course, so that we can eat it like after it has been packaged. So the toffee is useful, but the wrapper is unuseful. It is unwanted, right? So then that solid material, we are just talking about the solids here, solid waste, okay? So that solid which is unwanted and it is harmful for the earth, or you can say harmful for that environment, that is known as garbage, the unwanted material. Now, the unwanted material which is garbage can also be segregated. Let's see that what kind of garbage are we releasing, right? So, let's see that waste could be, or the garbage could be of two types, biodegradable and non-biodegradable. Biodegradable means Biodegradable means that they can be degraded in the nature by the decomposers. The decomposers, like there would be some bacteria, some saprotrophs, right? So what will they do? They will, of course, slowly, but they will decompose, they will degrade these biodegradable waste. These biodegradable waste includes the organic waste, the municipal waste, or you can say the home waste like peels of vegetables and fruits, right? So these biodegradable waste, the peels, the organic waste, they can be degraded by the decomposers, so that of course they can be broken down into very simpler substances, and then it is safer to degrade them into the soil so that they will receive some nutrients. So from the biodegradable waste we can also form manure, and this manure will provide nutrients to the soil, so we can help the producers to grow. But then there are some harmful type, much more harmful type of waste, which is non-biodegradable waste, and these waste cannot be degraded by the decomposers. For example, let's see plastics. Okay, plastics are a very known and popular example of the non-biodegradable waste, which is plastics. The plastics cannot be degraded by the decomposers and hence poses a very huge threat on our environment. But again, the question is, let's see that these are harmful, okay? But what about these biodegradable waste? Should we let these biodegradable waste out in open? Because they also involve the dead bodies of plants and animals, right? And also the organic waste, the peels, and everything. Even if they are present in the surrounding for a lot of time, they can also cause a lot of diseases as well, right? So keeping them in open is also not a good idea, and utilizing more non-biodegradable waste is also a very harmful thing, right? So what should we do? So thereby there is a need for proper waste disposal. Proper waste disposal, and this involves the segregation of waste at the initial level. Segregation of waste that has to begin at homes. You might have seen that there are different kinds of dustbins also, like the red bins and the blue bins, so that at your homes even you can segregate the different types of waste, the biodegradable waste, the dry waste, and the wet waste. Okay. Now, of course, there would be many other type of it also, like the green bins for biodegradable, blue for non-biodegradable, red for harmful. Red for harmful, like from the hospitals we can get a lot of chemicals, right? Like radioactive things also, so that has to be done in the red bins. So this has to be done at the initial level, the segregation of the waste. And the next thing that we can do is the 4R technique. 4R technique. Renew, reuse, recover, and recycle. All right. That means suppose, like which thing that, like suppose we have this plastic bottle or the glass bottle, right? So when, let's see, we have ordered a juice or some cold drink in this glass bottle, so it can be renewed. You can make it into some ornamental or some aesthetic thing, right? Again, what you need to do, you reused this thing. Here you reuse this thing. About the paper cups, that we utilize, to form, like we can have some drinks in it, right? So they can be recycled. The paper cups can be recycled so that it can be utilized again. Okay, you can always say no to plastics. Say no to plastics because you are very well aware that all of these things are going to degrade your environment, and it is your responsibility. You have to be vigilant enough to save the natural resources, not just for you but also for the future generations. So always remember that you are responsible for your future generations. Okay, on that note, we have come towards the end of the session, and thank you so much for joining. Now let me quickly tell you some of the questions, some of the topics that are very important for this chapter. So first of all, do not ever forget three things. The first thing is the 10% law, second thing is the biological magnification, and the third one is actually the ozone layer. That it could come in any form. The degradation of ozone layer, the depletion of ozone layer, the formation of ozone layer, the harmful effects of depletion of ozone layer. Okay, now the question could also come from the food chain, where you have to tell me about the energy transfer. There is one important question, which was from the type of ecosystems. Now the question is that we don't go and clean the oceans and the seas entirely, but we have to regularly clean our aquariums. Why is it so? And this question is very important. It has been your previous year question. The answer is because in the artificial ecosystem, it's actually an incomplete ecosystem because there is a lack of decomposers. What does the decomposers do? The decomposers degrade the dead and decaying matter, and then of course they break it down into simpler forms. Okay, so because of the lack of decomposers, the artificial ecosystems has to be cleaned again and again. Okay, so this is all from my end, guys. I hope everything is very clear for you. And just as I always say, keep on taking care of yourselves, keep on eating, playing, and learning well, of course, with me. And I'll come back with the revision classes so that everything would be clear to you. Now let me know in the comment section if you need anything else from us, and whether these classes were helpful for you or not. Okay, so thank you so much, guys. I'll see you in the next class. Bye bye.